But really, it wasn't until I left my parents' home, because I was raised on real food. My parents grew most of our food, and then I moved into the city, and I was buying food in the grocery store, and I couldn't eat it. It didn't have any life to it. It was just flat. This was in the mid-70s, and the food system was really broken. There was nothing to eat. So that's when I realized I had to be a farmer to feed myself, and I wanted to be able to feed other people as well. But how was I going to get started? That was the part that was really challenging. And you know what? I was facing the same things that young beginning farmers of any age, not just young, but beginning farmers are facing now. How was I going to get access to land, and interest rates were 15%. You think, you guys have it bad when you're trying to start. Imagine paying 15%. So it was really, how am I going to get started in this? And there was no, what did organic mean? Nobody knew what organic meant. And local wasn't a buzzword. Gourmet and imported from France, that cheese from France, that's what was hot in the mid-70s. And so it was really a different world. And there's one word that I want you to leave today with, and that's this word fungible. Any of you familiar with the word? You want to be fungible? You want to be fungible? Don't you want to be fungible? What do you think? You don't know. All right. So I've been meeting some of you, and I know some of you are CSA farmers, and there's some farmers market farmers out there, lots of direct marketers. There's some row crop farmers who are getting into vegetables on the side. And this word is really important because fungible means freely exchangeable for or replaceable for another of like kind or nature. So if you grow a commodity crop and it's just being sold into the commodity market with no differentiation, you're fungible. And you as a farmer, you're just as replaceable as that crop. And that word I put up there is really important because I was asked to talk about wholesale markets tonight. And we know that if we want to make this local food movement grow to the next level, we do have to look at the wholesale market. But it's a vulnerable market because of this component of fungibility. So I want to really focus tonight on how you can enter that market and not be so fungible, not be so vulnerable, because that can be the difference between success or not. When we talk about wholesale, there's restaurants and food hubs and direct-to-retail stores. Any of those, you could do that just as a commodity crop where you're just selling the product to them and they're reselling it. But if you don't differentiate yourself or have some form of co-marketing, you're going to be very fungible in those markets, and you're going to be very vulnerable. You can be replaced by another. So I want to really focus on what you can do to become less fungible when you run your farms. So I want to tell you a little bit about my farming history. There was this young woman like, how am I going to start farming? And really I was driving down the road one day. This is actually how it happened. I'm actually embarrassed to say it. And driving along, there was a sign that said, "Turn here, sweet corn." And I just whooped right in that driveway. And there it all was, that flash of tomato and the scent of corn and basil. And there was a really handsome farmer. So if you want the love story, read the book. It's a love story. And Martin, who I ended up marrying, was farming on fifth-generation family land in Eagan, Minnesota. It was a really beautiful farm. I actually think I fell in love with the land first, and then I fell in love with the man. I came with the land because it was 120 acres, and there was only about 30 tillable. And the rest of the land was still in an intact ecosystem. The fields were just small, tucked in the valleys and on the side of the hill. I was young and naive. I actually thought, wow, I don't get the fuss, because this is kind of easy. I mean, we worked hard. We planted, we harvested, we sold. Hard work physically. But the management of our pests and diseases was being managed in the diversity of our landscape. We really weren't doing anything. And at the time, I didn't know that. I didn't understand that these were ecosystem services being provided to me as a farmer, because it was just this intact ecosystem that we were benefiting from. But there was a problem, and we had this beautiful farm, and we had a roadside stand. There's the famous sign that pulled me in, lured me into that garden. We had a roadside stand. It earned us a living. He had started the farm in 1973, was certified organic in 1974. And his problem was that he was ahead of his time. So he had been in the organic market for 15 years before I came along. I joined him in 1985. That's actually 12 years. But he was too early, and he was very cutthroat. There wasn't any awareness of the word organic, so he had to educate every single customer. He had to do a lot of market development. And we also wholesaled, but our wholesale was really a minor portion of our business. We were very small because there wasn't a large wholesale market at that point in time. And then the bottom fell out because the city of Eagan, where we farmed, hadn't left any land zone for agriculture. It was a rapidly developing suburb, and so the day came when the school needed 20 acres to build a school. Can't really say no to school, so that land was sold. And at first we thought, well, we can continue. There's 120, so we'll still have 100 acres. It meant that we were farming, you know, on land that was next to this land being bulldozed, and we had our fields there. And we thought we could continue, but then they needed to bring the sewer and water across the land to serve the school. And when they do that, the land gets assessed because it's more valuable because now it can be developed. They didn't recognize it as already developed as an organic farm and roadside stand. So that's just a noose around the land's neck, those assessments, because there's 11% interest against them. And that means that every 7 years, which you always double, 500,000 becomes $1 million, becomes $2 million, becomes $4 million. This is not an unusual story. Hundreds of thousands of farms across the country have faced this. In this case, there were 4 sisters, Martin's cousins, who had to make a decision. And in the end, they decided to sell the land. What happened next completely changed my life because we were allowed to continue to farm until it was developed. And they took it in 3 years. So it meant that we were farming land immediately adjacent to land that had no life. You know, they came in, they took every tree, every bush, every blade of grass. They even sold soil. And when I say adjacent, I mean that's a broccoli field with my young children next to land that is completely void raped. We couldn't take the crop off those fields adjacent. It was an ecological collapse. There was no life left. There I went from being just totally taking ecosystem services for granted, young, naive, having real no awareness that they existed, to suddenly realizing that we are utterly dependent on nature. We cannot survive without it. Seeing it at this small microcosm, and then to just have it be replaced by houses. There really wasn't much we could do. We didn't own it. We owned 1 little acre over here with our roadside stand. But we could talk about it. You know? Maybe you can't stop something, but we can still talk about it, right? And so we did. We made a video documentary. It was an hour long. It was on PBS. And I actually have some here tonight if anyone's interested in them. It was filmed in 1989 on our original farm. And it really talks about a food system and why it matters that we have this land so close to the urban area. So, you know, long story made very short. The long story is the book. There we were on 1 acre trying to keep our business going. We were renting land on 18 properties with a 30-mile radius. Talk about trying to be economically viable in that setting. We finally found a new farm. We moved. It was the most beautiful land in the world, and our farm took off. But it's got me asking this question of what is a farm? Because, you know, I looked it up in the dictionary and it said, a tract of land suitable for agricultural purposes. I thought, well, that's not what a farm is, and, you know, I'm still a farmer, and here there's not even any land left. And I really ended up with this definition of a farm is a synthesis of the land and the people and the business. And they each bring their own component. You know, the land brings the soil type and the topography and the climate, etc. The people bring their past skills. Every single one of you has skills you've learned through your whole life that you bring to your farm, whether it's skills at marketing or fixing machinery. That's going to be unique to your farm. And then that business climate, that's all going to come together and make that unique farm. So when we talk about your farms being really vibrant and resilient, it's just really crucial that you look at that synthesis that your people and your business and your land bring together and create a farm that's going to match for those. When I look at the history of our farm, which is now a 40-year history, and I look at all the changes that we've made based on the market, based on where people were at as far as their education level about these things, the challenges we faced, that we had to just stay really nimble. We had to be so frugal in those early 20 years. My banker likes to say, wow, you guys were like an overnight success after 30 years. Because there was this 20-year period of just building markets where my kids actually thought bananas were this exotic, expensive treat, because we didn't buy anything. We just had to really be frugal as we built our markets, as we got people educated. It was this, market development after market development, and then all those challenges. So when I think about talking about wholesale to you tonight, we made a living running a roadside stand. It was a great place to educate people. It was a place to build our relationships, but we became wealthy in the wholesale market. That was where the real money was. But to be successful at wholesale, you really need certain components. And if we're going to talk about whether or not wholesale is going to work for an individual farm and that unique synthesis, and where your farms are going to fit into this food movement, it's just really important that you match that synthesis of your farm to that market.